Hey, good morning, fam. Got a question for you, especially for the military. Now, if the United States military have a high standards of excellence, then should we have a high standards for the military to have the Secretary of Defense? Where I'm going with this? So when I was watching the confirmation hearing of Pete Hegseth, it was very disturbing to me, the answers that I got watching the confirmation hearing. Some of the questions he dodged, some of the questions he got evasive and defensive, and some questions he didn't answer at all. So where I'm going with this: military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, Coast Guard, all have a high standards of excellence and integrity and dignity. Pete Hegseth have none, and I tell you why he don't have none. One of the questions that were asked in the confirmation hearing about rules of engagement, about protesters marching on the streets, exercising their First Amendment right, freedom of assembly and speech, if they had discontent with the government. And the question was, are you going to be dispatched in the streets among the crowd, and will you use force or shoot in the leg the most? Will you go through with that order? Pete Hegseth did not answer the question, which that sometimes my dad, who's a Vietnam vet, he said, "Son, sometimes no answer is an answer." So the answer to that question, that yes, he will use brute force to disperse a mob. Now, what I remember about the United States military, or any type of military, they defend the people and their constitutions. Now, here's the thing about the confirmation hearing, that about Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing, that was kind of disturbing. Okay, I lied. No, I didn't. It's not kind of disturbing. It was very disturbing. He kept saying Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. You, you don't serve Donald Trump. You serve the people, and you protect the United States Constitution, which that was very alarming. And I was wondering, about the rules of engagement. Is this man willing to stand down, or will he actually pull the trigger on a unarmed civilian who is a citizen of the United States, or basically just walk away? There are some um, things in the military. If I'm not a total expert, don't take my word for it. But if an order is questionable, that goes against the morality or integrity, then the order should not be followed. Pete Hegseth, when he was asked the question about the Geneva Convention, about how we handle war prisoners, that are we gonna go by the Geneva Convention, or are you gonna support torturing criminals or war prisoners? He was going on blah blah blah, all this stuff. I'm sitting here like, answer the question, yes or no. He evaded the question. So basically, he would go back to torturing prisoners. We did the waterboarding during 9/11 under the Bush administration, and that was against the Geneva Convention. And then a lot of things I want to talk to you about Article 15. So basically Article 15 is the code of conduct in the military, things that you get dinged for. Now, Pete Hegseth had displayed a lot of sexual misconduct outside the realm of the military. Now, here's the thing. Even though you got out of the military, you still represent the military. It doesn't matter if you're in or out of uniform. Pete Hegseth had sexual misconduct of assaulting a woman and making her sign a non-disclaimer agreement. Basically, it was an NDA, making sure. No, he had his attorneys and her sit down and sign that, so nothing could come back on him. But which it did in the confirmation hearing. And he lied about it. Now, in the military, when it comes to code of conduct, honesty, integrity, dignity. Through the hearing, he lied his way. Another thing that was very disturbing. Okay, I'm not a perfect Christian, but Pete Hegseth was like, "Oh, I'm a Christian man and all this stuff." Okay, fine. Hoorah and sympathetic to you. But if you're in a hearing, you're supposed to have transparency. Even in the civilian world, on a job interview, you're supposed to have transparency when it comes to certain questions. And I know in certain questions on application, and I'm surprised this one kind of, well, it's on the federal government, but I'm surprised this flew. Have you been convicted of any type of crimes, misdemeanor or felony? Yes or no? If yes, what was it and when? Now, we got President-elect Trump committed 34 felonies and some more. But like someone said, the American people made their choice, and he still got the job. Now, fam, it was me and you with a felony, not even 34. Not one. No apartment, no job in the private sector, because they do security clearances back to 25 years. And then in certain jobs, like in retail, you won't even get hired for. You get dismissed. And another question, based on the military side of it: have you served in the military? Are you still in the military? Have you been discharged from the military? Do you receive an honorable or dishonorable discharge? If so, what? Honorable discharge is medical. And sometimes it could be mental. Dishonorable discharge is Article 15, which range from court-martial, misconduct, anything that disgraces the men and women in uniform. Now, there have been times that Pete Hegseth went out. He was not in the military when all this happened. He went out and went drinking. it got so bad that he got carried off a few times. He was a news anchor or host on Fox and Friends. Fam, let me ask you a question. What if you showed up on the job drunk? What if? Would you get fired? Would you get recommended, or would you get sent home? Now, if Pete Hegseth get the job of Secretary of Defense, he cannot display that type of behavior. For one, Secretary of Defense, that job is a 24/7 job. You got to be up on point, meaning your mind has to be sharp. I mean, you just can't come in there hung over. And let's say you have a briefing in 15 minutes. I'll be there. I got a headache. Knowing damn well you went out and were drinking and you got a hangover. And then there was allegations that he cheated on his wife and had a child with another woman. He took responsibility of being the father of the child. I think later on he ended up marrying that one. But in the military, they frown upon things like that. When you sign up in the military, like marriage, it's a commitment. You're committed to do a job. You're committed to uphold the Constitution, not uphold Donald Trump. You uphold to defend the people, not Donald Trump. Pete Hegseth lied and weaseled his way to a confirmation using religion as a crutch to get in with the people on the MAGA side. Now that kind of breaks it. Now I know a lot of you have friends and family that served in the military, but let me ask you a question. How will you feel personally that a person like Pete Hegseth, with all these allegations of sexual misconduct, cheating, and is willing to use force on peaceful protesters, which Donald Trump called his own people, the United States of America, citizens, the enemy within? How would that make you feel? How would that make you feel that there's a conflict breakout and Pete Hegseth is in charge of all military operations, and the generals had to go through him, and he tobacco it because he came to work hung over because he went out drinking? Pete Hegseth made a promise to the president-elect that if he gets his job, he would stop drinking. You should stop drinking way before this. Now, because you was a citizen who used to be in the military, and all this allegation and muck is coming back in a confirmation hearing. And what's kind of offensive, LGBT community, people of color, and women serving in the military also. Pete Hegseth cut them down like there was not nothing. He said women had no business serving in combat. So, my question to Mr. Hegseth, do you expect women to go back home and cook your meals, iron your clothes, and do your laundry? women have as much right to serve in the military as men, white males especially. Because Pete Hegseth was talking about um, cutting down, I can't remember what he said, but whatever it was, newsflash, you just can't have just white men serve in the military and disregard people of LGBTQ community and people of color because they fought just as well. Now, you can't downplay the men and women in the military because to get rank, my best friend was telling me about promotional points. You got to have X number of promotional points to move up in rank. And he was talking about, I think there was a soldier who was LGBT community high ranking. Pete Hegseth was talking about stripping that person down the rank because of their gender. And another thing about Pete Hegseth, which is deserving, there are some women in the military, God bless them, were survivors of assault. And Pete Hegseth was one of those who committed assault. I'm not saying he committed assault in the military, but outside his military life, when he left the military, he was involved and he was engaged in those acts. If you get a chance, listen to the Pete Hegseth confirmation hearings. I'm not asking for a like. I'm not asking for a comment, or I'm not asking for a subscribe, because after watching that confirmation, I didn't like that BS. When I was growing up, I had so much admiration for the military. I wanted to go in when I got a certain age. My father, he served in Vietnam, 71. He didn't talk too much about it because there are certain things that soldiers don't talk about. So I kind of figured the area that he was fighting at was between Cambodia and Vietnam. So I had 2 chances to go. Well, 3. I want to be in the Navy, and I thought about that crap. I'm like, wait a minute, I can't swim. That's no good. If the ship go down, I go down with the ship. Oh well. So I was getting ready to go into the Marine Corps. I never seen a soldier from Marines recruiter was shaken by my father, who was a Vietnam vet. My father was like, don't glorify this shit for my son. I've been in the fields, I've been in the trenches. If you want him, you can have him, but first he's going to college. Okay. I went to college, got my associate's degree. My younger brother, who went in, passed away March 22nd, 2003. Going from Kuwait to Iraq. He stopped me from going. And I was trying, so the crazy story behind that was, so before his deployment, we all went, me, my best friend, and my brother, we all went to the club that night for a send-off. And he said, have you wondered why you haven't gotten calls from the military? You know, at the time, I didn't think about it because I was wondering, why haven't I? But since he brought that up, yeah. And he said, don't worry, bro, you're safe. I looked at him, and what you do? I was like, what you do? I told him you were unstable. I told him you're unstable and unfit to go. I'm like, what the hell? I was a little upset at first, and when I approached my mom about the conversation, they talked before the deployment. He had a feeling he was not going to make it back. That's why he didn't want me to go. Instead of suffering 2 L's in the family, we still suffer an L. I admire him for what he did for his country. He served with honor and integrity. No sexual misconduct. No allegations of cheating. My best friend, currently serving in the National Guard. Proud of him. Married with 2 kids. Going up for E7. Much love to you. But my biggest concern is what if Pete Hegseth get in? Basically, it's kind of like having back and repeating the Civil War all over again. So later on, the general by the name of USC's Grant, he was the president of the United States, I think after Abraham Lincoln. So when General Lee did unconditional surrender at Appomattox Courthouse in 1865, Grant showed up. His uniform was tattered. He had alcohol in his breath. And I'm thinking, that part of history, I'm like, oh no, we're doing, with Pete Hegseth, we're doing a USC Grant all over again. We're gonna have a drunker for the Secretary of Defense. This ain't gonna go so well. And then I thought about other failed events that could have possibly happened under this administration with Pete Hegseth. There was a poem called "The Charge of the Light Brigade," and this battalion of which was cavalry on horses led a gallant charge. But what happened was it was a miscalculated charge, and the Light Brigade had perished in vain. There was a general in the Civil War, I can't remember if he was Union or Confederate, General Pickett, known as Pickett's Charge. That was not a successful campaign. That was a debacle. The reason why I'm naming some of these military operations that was a debacle, I'm giving a history lesson because I don't want that with Pete Hegseth. I don't want that for my best friend who might get deployed again under Hegseth. Will Pete Hegseth be the sober Pete Hegseth, or he's going to be the Pete Hegseth that's going to be a drunkard? Now, it's so many questions that is mesmerizing. It'll make you want to say, "Wow." All these things from lying and the on a job interview. So basically, the confirmation hearing, is basically a job interview for a high-ranking government job. So he lied. A lot of the stuff that Hegseth did would have been under Article 15 and a dishonorable discharge. But Hegseth has some buddies that probably covered up for him. And he said that that's not true. I was falsely accused. So, another question I'm going to throw at you. Something to think about. How you going to have, how you can say you are falsely accused when there's documentation presented, that said you did X, Y, and Z. And then Pete Hegseth's mom came out and said he was abusive. But here's the weird thing about that. Not too long after she told people, this is my son, he's a rotten mother freaker. She recanted or retracted her statement. Now, it makes you wonder. Okay, if you said this about your son and you know this about your son, but why you retract the statement? What's your motive? Are you getting paid to retract that statement? Because there's some motivation behind that we don't know about. A military under Pete Hegseth, it's going to be disastrous. Because but also Secretary of Defense, you have to balance the budget, the military budget. That fool can't add 1 + 1 = 2. There was, I think he had a little company, and he couldn't manage the budget on that. He tobaccoed that. And you're probably thinking, what does have to do with mental health? It has a lot to do with mental health. Not only the mental health for the men and women of the U.S. military that is serving Pete Hegseth, but it affects your mental health. Because if there's a conflict breakout, and this dude to botch the operation, and so many people lost their lives because he didn't have the tenacity to tack, or even though he was in the military, he didn't have the experience to run a department like this. And the reason why I said this affected mental health, because one thing you don't want to get, okay, a couple things. For one, you don't want to get a knock at the door saying, Mr. or Mrs. Forrester, we sadly regret that your son or daughter is not coming home. They passed away in combat. The details is not disclosed, cannot be disclosed at this time. But we're here to inform you that your son or daughter is not coming home. Then you got a military funeral. If if that phone call or a couple of soldiers showing up at the doorstep saying your loved one ain't coming home, don't mess you up, then you get the military flag. You have the funeral with friends and family. And you're wondering why. Why my son? Why my daughter? Why my husband? Or why my wife is in that box? Then you get the 21 gun salute. Actually, the 21 gun salute, I learned was 7 servicemen standing on the line, firing rifles 7 times. And it's known as a 21 gun salute. There, and then you had to go through the 7 stages of loss: bargaining, anger, denial. I'm gonna name those 3 stages because those are the main ones. But deep down, you be so damn angry. You want to blame someone. You want to blame the government for the loss of that person in your life. And you wonder why this measure happened. Why I had to lose the person I love in my life. So the answer to that question, if Pete Hegseth get confirmed by the Senate, there's 3 people you might have to ask that question to. Donald Trump, because he chose Pete Hegseth knowing he wasn't qualified and fit for the job, with all these allegations and murky waters surrounding him. That's one main person you have to ask. Why you chose a man who is not fit for the job or qualified? Now, I don't get to see my son anymore. I don't get the chance to see my daughter. I don't get to see my husband. I don't get my wife. Why you made this choice? That's the first person you ask. The president, the incoming president and administration of the United States. Ask them for that. Then the second group, I'm gonna throw them underneath the bus. The Senate, who confirmed Pete Hegseth and gave the green light of him for the position. That's another question. Write your senator and ask him that question. Why you confirm a man that lied, don't have any experience, he's not in it for the Constitution, but serving a man. Okay. Person number 3, ask Pete Hegseth. What was the purpose of going over in that area when we had no damn business there? That's the process of anger you're going through. Because you want answers. You want to wring someone's neck. You want someone's head. You're out for blood because you lost that person. And because the military cannot go through details of what happened in that region. And you look back, this is Pete Hegseth's behavior. It's not unintentional behavior. Unintentional behavior, like let's say I was walking down down the hall. I was looking at something on my phone. I accidentally bumped into you. That was my bad. I shouldn't have been looking at my phone. Excuse me. That's an example of unintentional behavior. Intentional behavior is the intent to plan, and you're willing and you're willing to do the act, and you know the act is wrong. Like uh, inciting acts of violence. You know the act is wrong, but yet you're gonna go through with it. That's intentional behavior. Now, another question I'm gonna ask you about this: what if people protest about a conflict, about disdain about the government? Pete Hegseth deployed the National Guard. And the order is anyone out of line, you shoot to kill. How would that make you feel? That make you feel uneasy because you're gunning down your own citizens. Does that make any sense? You're gunning down citizens who's exercising their First Amendment right. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. I want to give you some couple points that, in history that I don't want happen here. So, in 1988, in China, called Tiananmen Square, students were protesting the Chinese government. The Chinese government sent tanks, yes, sent actual tanks to disperse the protest. 8 people got mowed over by those tanks. I was a little kid in 1988 when that happened. I was watching the news footage of that happening. It horrified me. I looked at my father. At first, he didn't say anything, and he looked at me, then in my eyes, and said, "Son, yes, you're actually witnessing tanks being used to disperse a protest." And it horrified me because I didn't know at a young age that was practical use of practicality of force to disperse a protest, and they're just protesting peacefully. During the Vietnam era, students were protesting against the Vietnam War, and yet the guard was dispersed into the crowd, and some protesters were either wounded or even killed. Okay, I'm not gonna use the word killed, or casualty. And there's other instances around the globe that, especially in the Middle East, when people protest the government, and here comes the military, supposed to disperse the crowd. Now, rules of engagement, when it comes to that, you find means to disperse the crowd. Without force. Force is the last option. My question to Mr. Pete Hegseth, if confirmed in the rules of engagement, let's say there's a protest going on in Washington D.C., and the military is dispersed. Mr. Hegseth, Are you going to use force as the first option, or you're going to use force as the last option? You have to go through exhaust all your other options before you use force as an option. But then again, Pete Hegseth ain't gonna answer that question, because you know why? Like my father said, son, sometimes no answer is an answer. Pete Hegseth will use the military on its own citizens. Fam, I'm not trying to do a video of gloom and doom. I'm not trying to do a video like this to dampen your day. I just want to inform you of the incoming administration and the Department and the Secretary of Defense of Pete Hegseth. This man don't have no integrity. This man, he says he's a Christian, but the acts he committed were unchristian-like. Okay, we all human. We all have life lessons. We all got the answers to somebody. But to lie and send a confirmation hearing to get a job, not to be transparent, does that make you wonder what his motives are? Does that make you wonder what's the next conflict gonna be? Is the conflict gonna be here at home, dealing with people protesting, and Pete Hegseth have the license to kill and not to kill, or we're gonna have boots on the ground somewhere else that we shouldn't be there because the president-elect want us there that we shouldn't be there. Sometimes being a good soldier is taking a stand and doing what's right, even though there's consequences of a possible court-martial. If it's not right, then don't do it. On that note, God bless, and salute to the men and women of the United States military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marines, and Space Force.